Okay, welcome back to This Authoritarian Life, a podcast hosted by me and President Xi. This week I want to start by expressing sincere admiration for Democratic Party.
Oh, okay, Boomer.
Well, I have been listening to the new Jack Tapper book.
Oh, audiobooks too, huh?
Well, you know, some of us actually read rather than just lurking on TikTok all day.
Okay, go on.
Anyway, this Biden thing, I am just so impressed. I mean, look, on one hand, we have all concealed health problems of aging leaders, right? We did it in Soviet Union, you did it with Mao.
The Americans even did it with FDR.
Exactly. A shout out to all the jelly legs, last president we really got along with. But anyway, here is big difference. You never, ever saw Brezhnev or FDR just like fall off a horse on television.
You never saw Mao wandering around looking for ice cream.
Never. But these guys, they had Biden out here every freaking day, falling down, confused, stumbling, looking like melted gelato in suit and tie. And they were just like, sorry, believing of own eyes no longer permitted.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Nostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Straight ahead, fighting anti-Semitism, academics, and aggressive taxes. Daniel Flesch, Jacqueline Toboroff, and Patrice Onwuka all with us. Then we'll jet off with John Gobbels. Plus, a sketch comedy from Al Berry, Puppet Regime, and the Bobbies of the Babylon Bee, along with Alex Warren, this week in the Spotlight. And now from Times Square, where the lights never dim, nor do the opinions. Sharper than a New York slice and twice as cheesy, here's the Kevin!
Held one up for my friend there, former police commissioner Bernie Kerik, who we lost this week. He loved a good New York slice as much as anybody. And it was a somber end to the work week for those of us that knew the former commissioner. This was a man that not only stood by New York City in her greatest moment of need, he was a man that did so on the foundation of a story that was never supposed to be told. See, what a lot of people know about Bernard Kerik is that he was a high school dropout, and he worked his way up as someone that didn't have a college degree and didn't do all the right things that you were supposed to do, and going from, you know, an entry-level policeman to the commissioner of the jail system in New York City, and eventually an NYPD detective, and eventually the commissioner of the entire police force, the world's most important police force, the world's largest police force. And to have what visited him on 9/11, on that day, was really something that, well, I heard President Bush say this many times in the aftermath of that horrendous day. And it was this, that crises will do something to you. They will bring out something in your character, in your experience, in your fiber. They will reveal what is there. And they'll either show you in all your weakness and your inability to face your greatest challenges, or in the crisis, in the middle of the crisis, you will find your greatest strength. And that's why on the day of his passing, Friday of this last week, I penned the words in townhall.com at the very end of the column that this was a man who had a spine of steel, who walked into a billowing cloud of ash, who had radios buzzing and bodies falling from the sky all around him. And yet, instead of shying away, He just kept walking straight into the middle of the disaster. He was the first person to respond and be able to help get people to safety. And eventually, it was his presence there in Lower Manhattan that even saved the life of Mayor Giuliani and several others. This was a man who, after his life as the commissioner of the New York Police Department, boy, I wish I could have tapped him to come back 2 or 3 times after he was retired. He went on to serve President Bush in a very important role after 9/11 in a couple of ways. One, he created the Joint Terrorism Task Force. That's the task force that worked between the anti-terrorism federal authorities and the local police stations in different cities across the country. He went on to help rebuild the city. He went on to help give guidance and advance notice to the royal families of Jordan and Saudi Arabia. He helped them build prison systems that were more humane but equally tough for the inmates to be able to survive. He also single-handedly, from basically putting all the ideas into a white paper, helped President Trump in his first term bring about genuine justice reform, meaning that people that were in prison wrongly shouldn't still be there, and people that did need to be there should be serving their full sentences. And it was in the coming to start with that program that people really began to understand that even though he'd been a high school dropout, this was a man that understood strategy, and he understood things on a very deep level intellectually. But my experience with Bernie Kerik was this. He was immensely kind. Yeah, he was the toughest guy I knew. He was the John Wayne of John Waynes. He was a guy that barely smiled when he was out in public. And he and I spoke at a lot of common political events over the last few years, last 10 years or so, 15 years, where we would both be invited to come and give some greeting. And we would always share a warm embrace and be glad to see each other. He substituted as a radio host on my show multiple times. He was a guest frequently when we were having breaking news like a terrorist attack in London or in Paris or in other places. His wisdom, his insight, and his big heart just shone through in everything that he did. But I'll also never forget a very unique aspect of his kindness. It was telling the truth. It was telling the blunt truth as necessary. I'll never forget, we had a little problem with some people, associates of the family, and I needed his detective firm to kind of look into some folks. And within 24 hours, and I told him, said, Bernie, I can't afford to hire you. He goes, no, let me handle it. And he got his top investigator. And in 24 hours, he came back to me with 400 pages of what they had found. In 24 hours, 400 pages of what they had found. And he had his top investigator on the phone with me. And there we are, the three of us, and we're talking it through. And the lead investigator is saying, here's what we found, and it's this, and it's this, and we found this over here. And Bernie, who never was a one to suffer a moment of anything other than clarity, says, Kev, let me tell you, what he's trying to tell you is that this person is an effing criminal. He didn't always use church language, but he loved his God. He didn't always appear to be a super warm and fuzzy guy, but he had a tender, tender heart. And he may not have always gotten along with all of the politicians that were above him, but he loved his country. And New York and America, and certainly his family and the world, are poorer today because we lost Bernie Kerik this week. I've never cried over the death of a president, though there were several that I loved dearly. I shed a tear when I heard about the death of Commissioner Kerik. I was just with him on the campaign trail in 2024. We were at several events together, and it was good to see him, and we caught up, and it was always great to catch up with him. Over the last 10 years, I kind of gained a friendship with someone who's a historical icon, someone I never expected to have a friendship with. And yet I found that was just the way Bernie was. He just said what was true. He just did what was right. And he just helped people do what they needed done. At the end of the day, Bernie Kerik's going to be remembered for how he loved his country and what he did to help her in its biggest time of need, that day on 9/11. But I am so glad, friend, that in all of this, we have the ability to remember a man who was great by measure, by stature, by character. Bernie Kerik embodied those things that really mattered most. And I'm grateful to tell my own sons and others about him in the years to come. My prayers are with the Kerik family in these days. God bless you. God bless you, Bernie. Thank you for all that you did. Coming up, special edition of this weekend's That Kevin Show. Stick around. Plenty of humor, good music, lots of important news. Stay with us.
McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com, That Kevin Show on all social media. And if you use email, thatkevinshow@gmail.com. Glad to have you with us. Daniel Flesch is joining us from the Heritage Foundation. He oversees their Middle East and Northern Africa kind of research and studies what's going on and watches the events as they unfold. And Daniel, over the last 3 years, I feel like I've been a little bit of a voice crying in the talk media wilderness on the issue of Israel and anti-Semitism and all the stuff that is just so bothering to my soul and conscience in terms of what I see every day. But it really came to a capstone a couple of weeks ago when that innocent couple were gunned down by a guy who then calmly walks into a building and says, "This is for Palestine, free Gaza," and then walks out and acts as though he did nothing to it. And I made the comment over my weekend show this last weekend that it reminds me of those that never thought to question the policies of World War II Germany or the entire mentality towards just killing Jews because it's just what you do. That person seemed so hypnotized or brainwashed or just comfortable with the idea of genocide against a group of people. It's bothersome because we just came through Memorial Day, and my grandfathers fought in World War II. We fought to stop that great evil from spreading like a cancer over the rest of the world. And here we are in 2025 facing the exact same mentality. Daniel, what do you make of it?
Well, Kevin, I'd say your voice has been most welcome and a necessary one of these last few years, and particularly since the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel, that we've seen the rise of this anti-American form of anti-Semitism, not only in college campuses, but across America's city streets. And it came to kind of culmination, although it might be the last, God forbid, when Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky, Sarah was an American, Yaron is Israeli, but they were at a Jewish event in the middle of Washington, D.C. at the Capitol Jewish Museum. And the attacker, he committed an anti-Semitic terror attack. And you mentioned that your family who fought the Nazis, fought against anti-Semitism in Europe decades ago. About 10 years ago, I served in Israeli Defense Forces because Israel's facing the same enemies that we face here in the United States. And since October 7th, we've seen individuals like Elias Rodriguez, who committed this heinous act of murder, and others like him get radicalized, be part of these organizations that we have an initiative at the Heritage Foundation called the National Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism, in which we're implementing Project Esther, which is trying to go against and attack these organizations that are committing these acts of violence against Jews and non-Jews across America. So I wish we're at a turning point right now in which America's waking up to the very real threats that these individuals and organizations pose, not just to American Jews, but to America more broadly, because let's be very clear. Their goal is not just to intimidate or target Jews, although they were doing that. Their goal is to dismantle American society and Western civilization.
Yeah, which was the undermining motivation for Hitler as well. I mean, he wanted to take over the world and make it back in his image, and his image did not include a lot of people besides just Jews. He wanted to eliminate everyone that wasn't exactly like him, and it's bothersome that in history you have these tyrants that kind of move into this morphing of lacking reality and not understanding, humanity at its core. But one of the things I pointed out was that these two young people, they weren't even Jewish by faith. Like, they were ethnically Jewish. They supported Israel. They are a big believer in everything, but they were actually Messianic Christians. And that kind of demonstrates your point, that this isn't something that's relegated just to one sect of Judaism or one geography where Jews live. It is a blatant attack against anyone that has a connection to that, and by extension, the ideals that allow plurality and freedom and everything else to exist in a free society. But Daniel, the bigger question for me is, so we know that these heinous people are out there and they believe these heinous things. How do we stop them? Because he not only fired on them until they dropped, he went back to the young lady as she was trying to crawl away and shot her again. And then she sits up pleading for her life with what little strength she had left, and he shoots her at point blank range in the head. Like, it's not just that they had a grudge and they got angry and they killed someone. Like, this is cold-blooded evil that is bearing its fangs.
Very true. It's a horrific but true description of the events that occurred as we understand them. And this individual, he shouted "Free Palestine" as he was being taken into custody. And we must be very clear about two things that we're seeing in this movement today. One is those who shout "Free Palestine" is exactly like those who shouted "Heil Hitler" back in the 1930s in Germany. And those who are waving the Palestinian flag in agitation is just like wearing, the Nazi salutes.
Yeah.
And calling from the river to the sea. All these chants and slogans we've become all too familiar with the last 19 months since Hamas's attack on October 7th. We have to be aware, again, the goal is to destroy America. So how do we defeat it? Well, as I said earlier, Heritage has a plan called Project Esther to do just that. I invite your viewers to go type in Project Esther, the Heritage Foundation, to learn more. But essentially, it's recognizing that these individuals do not exist in a vacuum. They're part of a well-organized ecosystem or infrastructure that is trying to actively undermine the United States. And there's organizations like Students for Justice in Palestine, within our lifetime, the Answer Coalition. There's a whole constellation of organizations that are dedicated to this, and they're getting funding, and they're being funded by some very wealthy individuals, organizations, and countries. So it's an active effort to undermine our society. These guys do not operate in a vacuum. They're being funded, they're being radicalized, and it's a very real threat because many of them are American citizens. We're seeing the Trump administration right now taking action against those students who are not Americans, who are advocating for U.S. terror organizations. They're being deported right now, which is a great thing to see. But it takes all of society effort to realize that this rot that's not just in higher academia, but more broadly in our culture, needs to be excised. And the goal, last thing I'll say, is the goal is not to defeat or get rid of anti-Semitism, because sadly, that is a bigotry and a virus that's endemic in human civilization, but it's to recognize that the anti-American form of anti-Semitism that we are seeing play out today can be defeated, because there are organizations that we can identify and go after. There's individuals you can identify and go after and starting to take action.
And I kind of, I know that in the Trump era, it's not popular to coin George Bush, but I'm kind of like, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. And
100%.
There's no middle ground for me. And even in the language that they protest with, you mentioned all those phrases, but globalize the Intifada is literally placed everywhere. And people hear it and they kind of think, oh, well, that's just someone making an angry statement. No, that's the equivalent of saying, I'm with the Ku Klux Klan and I want to burn all black people at the stake. Like, there's no moral equivalency with such thinking, but to have such a blatantly, brutally, blunt message that they're walking around with, where they're literally calling for the elimination of everyone who's a Jew. We can't tolerate that as a society. I mean, there's lots of limitations on free speech as we know it in America. I don't think that calling for the elimination of an entire people group is one that we should ever get used to.
for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back, Kevin McCullough. Glad to have you here. That Kevin Show. And we love to have fun on the weekend. That's one of the reasons why this show exists. So we can laugh a little bit at the all too seriousness that the important people take themselves with. But there's also a little bit of a pang in my heart to do something that goes beyond that as well. And that's why I've been telling you about for the last few weeks our very special efforts with Christian Solidarity International. Without doubt, my favorite international organization to work with for this one reason. We have, while the rest of the world has argued about what it is to be woke and racist and non-racist and how you know if I'm racist if you can't judge my heart and everything, it's one thing for people to talk a big game. It's another thing for them to put their money where their mouth is. And what I love about you, my audience, and you've done this for several years, is that you've always seen way past the color barrier and said, what can I do to make the world better? And that's why we've now helped free 5,000 slaves over the last 10 years here at the Kevin McCullough Show microphone and That Kevin Show microphone. So we are once again doing it. We have a list of 208 specific slaves that we've already located in northern Sudan. We are in the process of doing everything we can to bring them home and to make their lives better, to improve their existence. Friends, if you understood what they have been through, it would tear your heart apart. You're talking about people that have been ritualistically abused since being taken captive in a war that ended 15 years ago. And in that time, while the rest of the world governments came together to stop the war, nobody thought it was important to get the slaves released that had been taken by the North. We're talking about northern Sudan and southern and South Sudan. South Sudan is now a wholly dedicated Christian country where these slaves grew up and where they would love to go back to. We have Arab retrievers that have penetrated the northern Sudan area. They have found a few more of the what we think is about 35,000 that are left, and we've negotiated their release. What they need now is to have their supplies, their kits, to start their life all over again. And we're excited to be able to tell you that that's what we're going to be able to get them with the bag of hope. In it is a year's worth of food, a year's worth of grain, utensils, tools, everything they need to make their life better. And friends, when you give that gift at 888-342-1010, you're changing a life right now. In fact, let me give you an example of a life that you did change just 2 years ago.
I was a child when I was abducted by the Arabs. My parents used to own livestock, and my mother would do all the cooking for us. I don't remember the year that I was captured. There had never been any problems in our village. Then one day, all of a sudden, we heard that there were Arabs attacking Dinka villages throughout the south. We were so worried we could not even sleep at night. It was a big concern to my mother and my father. We were told that these Arabs were heavily armed and would kill all the animals and people when they would attack. We were very scared. Then one morning, they attacked our village. We scattered in different directions and I ran, but I was captured. My entire village was burned down, and I've never seen a member of my family since. Then I was taken north, into slavery. My eyes saw horrific things on that trip to the north. Women were raped right in front of us. Men were beaten, and 4 men were killed because they tried to fight back. They were shot dead before our eyes. Once at the slave master's house, I was pretty much starved and worked brutal hours every single day doing difficult and very, very hard work. There was no relief. And then they raped me. My slave master did not think of me as a human. He would not even let me go to the hospital when I fell sick. And one day I heard that there was a slave retriever from CSI close by. How I wanted to be free. That retriever secured my freedom. And thank God I was able to return to South Sudan. Thank you to each of you who helped the slaves be free. But please don't stop until we get them all.
It's a reasonable request. The phone number is 888-342-1010, 888-342-1010. And your gift right now of only $250 will liberate another girl like Ahok, the one you just heard the story from. The names may sound different to our Western ears, but their hearts, their desires, their lives are no different than your own daughters. Friends, if you believe that slavery is evil, and if you believe that we should be here to make a difference, then please do. Pick up the phone, 888-342-1010, 888-342-1010. You can also give online by just going to Bring Her Home.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. Here he is from New York. That Kevin McCullough.
So glad to have you with us. Welcome back to That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com, That Kevin Show on all social media, and thatkevinshow@gmail.com. If, in fact, you are so inclined to drop me a note. I do read all of them. I don't get as much email as I used to. I think people are more into texting now than they used to be. I guess we're going to have to start that pretty soon. Anyway, Kevin McCullough, glad to have you with us. You know, we talk about travel at least once a week in depth, but we also talk about wellness one night a week on the Wednesday edition of the show. And I'm always very intrigued about how different areas of life overlap with each other. And a number of years ago, when I found one of my long lost sisters that I did not know I had for much of my growing up, she was actually a flight emergency nurse that would go to different countries and help basically pull people out of tough situations and get them back home so that they could receive medical care, usually for a life-threatening emergency of some sort here in the U.S. And so I started trying to read up on this a little bit more, and I thought, why am I killing myself? Why not talk to some of the experts about it? And joining us today, I'm very pleased to have John Gobbels with us, who is the Chief Operations Officer for a group called MedJet. And they actually do exactly what I just said. They go in and they help people come home for higher quality of care when they have been caught out of the country in a medical emergency. John, so good to have you. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Where did this sector of industry kind of develop? Whose idea was it originally? Were you guys the first, player in the pool, or how long have these types of services been available?
So that's a great question. It really goes back, MedJet itself has been around since about 1998. So we've been in the industry a long time, but the model itself was actually a Swiss model that was built for its citizens to repatriate them back to their home country if they travel, become ill or injured, and want to get them back into their own healthcare system. So that's how the model initially started, and we kind of took it from that and kind of made it into the membership model that it is today.
Do we know how many travelers on a given year globally end up needing emergency health care when they're out of the country?
Well, there are some statistics out there that, basically 1 in, 30,000 travelers, and there are millions and millions of travelers. So that we know that there are a lot of people that unfortunately need types of services like this. I can speak, kind of from MedJet itself that, we on a daily basis have multiple clients, both domestically and internationally, all over the world that find themselves needing some type of assistance. A lot of times that may not be a medical repatriation, just kind of monitoring their progress, and they're actually well enough to travel home, but they contacted us anyway, back to the point of actually needing to dispatch a long-range aircraft to bring them back in a critical situation or a not-so-critical situation.
Well, I would imagine even if they get some care locally whenever they experience their injury or illness, that there's probably plenty of circumstances in which they still need some more hyper-extended level of attention during their travel back, even if they're no longer in that immediate life-threatening situation.
And that's correct. A lot of times the initial stabilization of the patient is done where they're at, and they don't want to have an extended period of time away from family, away from their physicians, out of network, so to speak. And I think it's important to know that, our program is just not for the critically ill people. It does not really have a set of circumstances that you have to require that. You obviously, need to be traveling more than 150 miles away from home. You need to be hospitalized as an inpatient and require continued inpatient hospital care. So you really could be coming back for rehabilitation after you've already had some of those life-saving things done. And that's what our program does. There's no medical necessity to that, which will come into play domestically a lot with some programs. We don't have that, and we just get you back to your inpatient facility where you want to have your treatment done.
And I noticed that you use the word membership model, which is different than insurance. And I think people in the medical insurance arena kind of have an idea of what that's like, because there are membership programs that are not insurance programs, but you pay similarly to an insurance program, and then you have costs that are reimbursed on treatment. Is it like that? Is it like the MediShare kind of model in the medical insurance arena?
Well, certainly, we have a lot of members, and we all hope that our members don't need to have us do something for them, but they're always happy, and we're always happy in the event that they do need that. So while there's no so much as really cost sharing, we're different from the insurance model in the fact that all of your membership benefits are covered under your membership fee. So our members don't receive a bill after the fact. A lot of them think they're going to, and we've even had some that, wrote us letters after that they were afraid to go to the mailbox, after a huge international transport, thinking that we would subrogate to their insurance and then send them a bill for what was due after. That's not the fact here. We go at risk for that. Your membership fee is the only thing you pay.
That's a significant distinction, I think, from even your competitors, that they don't get the bill afterwards. Having said that, though, are we talking about obscene membership fees? I mean, is it like thousands of dollars a month to have something like this on standby?
And that's kind of one of the things that surprises people, and it may give them pause as well, because, a lot of people think that this would be, a very expensive thing to have, but you can get an individual membership for a short-term period. And that's one point of distinction I want to make, is the level of service that you receive from us is the same regardless of the membership type for the most part, as far as medical transport goes. So you can receive an individual for yourself for an 8-day membership. You're just going to take one trip a year, and you want to go to Southeast Asia for that, that is at $99. Your family can have that, or an individual could have that for a full year at only $315. So it's not expensive. When you think about the cost of a medical transport, could be well over $150,000 to $200,000, depending on where you're at. It's very affordable, and something I think people should take a look at.
I think that's one of the untold stories about what MedJet is, and it really is remarkable. I'm just thinking of my own family. We're a family of 5, frequently going cross-continent. We live in New York. My wife's family's all from, Southern California. Yeah. And I'm going to buy travel insurance, for my airline anyway, because I just think that's smart in case my flights get canceled or whatever. But for an additional $300 to be able to ensure that they would have access to be able to get back on a medical carrier if necessary, that's an amazingly low price.
Ready or not, we'll be right back. That Kevin.
James Comey, unfortunately posting 8647 failed to activate our non-binary sleeper agents. It turns out they have too much anxiety to even get out of bed. So let's table our plot to 8647 for now. Hillary, I swear I didn't know what 8647 meant. I figured someone just wanted to throw 47 people out of a bar or something. That's it, James. Just keep pretending to be an idiot. Maybe you should make an apology post saying you didn't know what those numbers meant. Ooh, great idea, Hillary. Freeze! You're under arrest for making threats against the president. I'm taking you in for questioning. Come on, James. You know what 8647 meant? You want the president to be assassinated, don't you? I swear I didn't know what it meant. I thought the shout said 8675309. I was like, wow, someone's a big Tommy Two-Tone fan. I would believe you, but unfortunately we had our experts at the Department of Justice crack your code. Let's start with 47. Why was 46 afraid of 47? Because 47, 48, 49. And 4 plus 7 is 11. Now we're at 9/11, which happened 8,647 days ago. And what's between 9 and 11, James? 10. The exact amount of letters in the name James Comey. Alright, you got me. But it was all Hillary's idea.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him from his Nostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Still to come. Breaking news from Jacqueline Toboroff and Patrice Onwuka. Look out, gentlemen. The ladies are in the house. More sketch comedy from the Bobbies of the Babylon Bee. And before we're done, Alex Warren, fresh off the AMAs, back in the spotlight. And now, from Times Square, broadcasting louder than a cabbie on a cold morning, and just as hard to ignore, here's the Kevin!
For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough. We start with the shocking development. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of America. Yes, you heard that right. America. In a surprise 6-3 decision, the High Court said, hey, maybe giving parole to like 500,000 foreign nationals without, a really good reason, maybe not such a good idea. Naturally, CNN called this xenophobic, MSNBC demanded impeachment, and Elizabeth Warren suggested we replace Justice Alito with an AI-powered dream catcher. Meanwhile, in Boston, ICE agents actually arrested people who committed crimes in America. They nabbed a murderer and 2 child rapists who shockingly did not enter the country to, quote, work hard and make life better. Turns out some migrants have come here and killed people and tried to ruin playgrounds. Who knew? Certainly not your local sanctuary city mayor. She was too busy declaring the city a judgment-free zone. Speaking of scams, President Trump's USDA just uncovered one of the largest food stamp frauds in U.S. history. Millions in EBT cards were traded for cash, meth, and what some experts believe may have been Taylor Swift tickets. Democrats called this economic equity, while Bernie Sanders insisted it was simply redistribution with snacks. Now let's turn to tech. Elon Musk continues to be the GOP's best accidental weapon, whether he wants to be or not. After backing away from his political antics, Republicans are now panicking that the only billionaire with a flamethrower and a Dogecoin fetish might stop tweeting memes that save the country. Ironically, the DNC is simultaneously trying to cancel him and buy Teslas. Next up, the Obamas, America's most scripted couple, was spotted in public for the first time in 6 months last night, prompting breathless media speculation. Are they separated? Are they splitting the Netflix deal? One body language expert on MSNBC noted that Michelle blinked 3 times in succession, which either signals distress or that Barack just said the word Martha's Vineyard like one more time. Meanwhile, in Boston, the place where dreams go to die, Shakira and Jason Aldean concerts at Fenway Park were abruptly canceled due to, quote, stage safety issues. Translation, someone found out Aldean still believes in the national anthem, and Shakira's hips finally told a lie. Over on CNN, Jake Tapper took a brave stand against his own party. after Democrat podcasters mocked his teenage son. In response, Tapper basically told the DNC, if you want the next generation to vote for you, maybe don't bully their parents on TikTok, which sadly had to be explained to Chuck Schumer using sock puppets. And finally, Lindsay Lohan has emerged from the sand dunes of Dubai to tell us how hard her life is in Dubai, where she fled to escape the trauma of Beverly Hills. She says Hollywood was so stressful, which is odd because the rest of us find her movies stressful. But hey, if a washed-up actress can find peace dodging paparazzi while drinking mocktails under Sharia law, maybe there's hope for me too. For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We've called this press briefing to draw attention to the commendable work being carried out by our local bobbies.
That means police officers in England.
As you may be aware, we've undertaken sustained efforts to reduce violence and violence-adjacent behaviour in order to restore a sense of safety to our streets. Thus, without further ado, here are the dastardly weapons of destruction we have confiscated this week. This stabbing implement was found on a suspect in the tube. Luckily, we managed to confiscate it before the suspect managed to do any harm or got to primary school. This terrifying implement was discovered on a 5-year-old walking down Northampton Shirvingshire Boulevard last week. He was apprehended and sent to time out. We found these dangerous sets of stabbing prongs from a gentleman of Asian descent. We believe he may have been planning a mass eye poking with these deadly weapons. Several of our bobbies recently noticed a group of eco-terrorists wielding these dangerous turtle asphyxiators. Horrifying. You'll be most assured to know that these despicable deadly beverage enthusiasts have been apprehended and are presently facing justice in the court of law. A would-be terrorist was wearing these in broad daylight over the weekend. Think of the persons that might have been slapped. Bob, please demonstrate. This is a spoon. Constable Bob, how'd that get in there? This is not a terrorist weapon. This has a rich cultural significance and brilliant craftsmanship. Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar!
A tiny sword. A tiny spear. A tiny book of bigotry. A fully semi-automatic aquatic assault rifle. And finally, the scariest weapon of all. We've confiscated these from a man who looked like he might use them to hurt someone.
He's been disarmed.
Well, there you have it. Thousands of British citizens are safer because of our important work. And remember, if you see something, say something, unless they're Muslim.
Allahu Akbar!
When there are constabulary duties to be done, one can certainly appreciate that a policeman's lot is not a happy one. Just a spoonful of Islam helps the tyranny go down, the tyranny go down, tyranny go down. Just a spoonful of Islam helps the tyranny go down.
Ready or not, we'll be right back. That Kevin. Now, back to That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's Kevin McCullough, That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com, That Kevin Show on all social media. And we couldn't be happier than to be welcoming back Patrice Onwuka, who is the Economic Policy Director for the Independent Women's Forum. And Patrice, it seems like every time, there's a significant issue that is, facing the nation in terms of a major question, you guys are quick to get polling done and completed and posted. And you've done a couple recently that I think are very telling, specifically as it relates to the big, beautiful bill.
Yes. Yeah, so we just did some polling where we found that nearly 80% of women, about 80% of independent voters, and 18 through 34-year-olds all support the 2017 tax cuts and want to ensure that they continue. This is perfect timing. As we know, the big, beautiful bill just passed the House of Representatives in record time, by the way. Kudos to Speaker Mike Johnson for getting that done. And so this is, women understand that, we can't afford a massive tax increase right now. Young people, seniors, independent voters, they recognize that they got a tax cut. Their small businesses benefited from those tax cuts, and they do not want a tax increase if this bill does not pass the House and the Senate.
This is one of the things I do not understand about the left. And it's one thing to hold your principles and to say, well, we believe the government should be a safety net program for people, and we want to try to help folks that are down on their luck and all the rest that they have over years said in that kind of fashion. But when you start actively campaigning on raising people's taxes, and it's not an insignificant number. What would the average tax increase be if the Trump cuts are not extended?
On average, 22%.
What is that in dollars?
I think around $1,600 for a family of four, making the median income of about $60,000.
That's a lot of money to have to come up with out of nothing, particularly when we're still trying to get the economy back on its feet. Why do you think the electorate understands this issue right now so much better than it oftentimes ignores kind of tax policy and kind of rolls their head back into their skulls and goes, I don't know, it's whatever the politicians figure out. It seems like particularly female voters and particularly those independent and younger voters that you were talking about are dialed in on this.
They are. I mean, families are hurting right now. We've been through 4 years of high inflation, high interest rates, which means it's hard to afford everyday life. It's hard to afford, it's buying things for the future, whether it's your retirement, saving for your retirement, or buying a house, starting a family. And so I think Americans are very price conscious. To now then say, we're going to increase your taxes by 22%, cutting your paycheck, cutting in half your child tax credit at the end of the year, cutting in half your tax deduction, your standard deduction. If you're a small business, you would see your small business top rate raised to over 43%. So to tell people that, we're not going to give that to you, which you are enjoying right now, we're going to let that expire and disappear. I think people are adamant that they want to keep that because they don't have the room in their budget for any more price increases.
Well, and I'm even going to take a very mild exception to your use of that terminology. And it's very mild, Patrice, because you're one of my favorite people. But it's not something that they're enjoying because the government gave it to them. The government was overtaxing them to begin with.
Good point.
They're just beginning to crawl back to a more rational, reasonable rate of taxation because part of the work of Doge and all these other things. We're spending money with the tax dollars that are coming in on things that do not help the American family, don't help the way of life for the average worker, and aren't dedicated to creating a better economy or making the world a better place. A lot of those tax dollars are getting funneled into special interests, payoffs, bribes, other types of make goods for politicians that owe favors to people, and we don't want any of that going on. And I think that Doge really did at least play some sort of role in helping people understand that your tax dollars aren't doing what you think they're doing.
Well, it certainly exposed a lot of that ridiculous spending, the overspending. And I think people are understanding, too, that when you are overspending, when you are gluttonous, when the federal government is gluttonous with tax dollars, it has a fiscal impact that can lead to the downgrading of our credit, as we've seen recently with Moody's downgrading our credit from, AAA to, I guess, AA1 level. But that has an impact on how much it costs for us as taxpayers to borrow and have to pay back in the future. That's the same thing with our home finances. When the interest rates go up, our credit card bills are higher, our mortgages are higher, mortgage interest obviously also, but everything we're spending, anything we're borrowing, it's more costly. And so if we have to restrain our budgets as families, why can't Washington restrain its own budgets?
Well, they're so busy trying to put more constraints even on small businesses, and for every compliance that we have to see to in the business sector, there's zero profit coming into the company for that. And in fact, you're spending resources to be in compliance. It's actually an economic degrader to the economy to go through that. Speaking of that, we are an entrepreneurial society, and we have always championed the entrepreneur. In fact, a lot of small businesses got started because somebody was in business for themselves and grew it from one little operation to something bigger than that. But the last administration really had, some sort of grudge against independent contractors and people that do work for themselves. Where are we on that issue, and what do the voters want?
Well, we have great updates. So right now, the Trump Department of Labor has halted any enforcement of Biden's regulations on the gig workers, on the independent contractors, the freelancers, all those people who are 1099 workers. You mentioned that ridiculous, onerous regulation. It would have been very difficult for regular people, whether you are doing it as a side hustle and you're driving for Uber, or you're a full-time freelance writer, freelance video editor, for you to continue to be independent rather than become someone's employee, whether or not you want to be. So the Trump administration has said, we're not going to enforce this. There are several legal challenges pending right now. And I do think that the Trump administration may also just come out with its own regulation. That said, Congress is the last stop. Congress should decide, how do we determine who are employees versus independent contractors? And thankfully, we have a piece of legislation in the House sponsored by Representative Kevin Kiley out of California to codify a really clear and simple definition that I think would bring a lot of clarity and protect independent contractors, gig workers, and freelancers. We're
too entrepreneurial of a society to not encourage more people to work for themselves. And, it's everybody wants to be, especially on the left, they want to be dogging big business all the time. See what this does to your idea of big business if you force everyone into employee positions. You're just going to concentrate more and more power at the top of those corporations that you already hate. And that's not good, but it's also a big burden on the worker themselves. Patrice Onwuka, head of the economic policy stuff over at the Independent Women's Forum. We're always so grateful that you spend time with us. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. Kevin McCullough coming back from New York. It's That Kevin Show.
Kevin
Welcome back to
McCullough.
That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com, That Kevin Show, all social media, That Kevin Show on the coffee mug. Check it out, thatkevinstore.com, but you can get the, and I know my next guest once she told me so in the DMs this morning. But Jacqueline Toboroff is with us. Jackie, I wanted you to come on the show because you have talked about educational issues. By the way, she's the author of Supermoms Activated. It's a Substack. It's a book. She's the living embodiment of what it is. So just take her word for it. We have been talking back and forth. You've been putting it on social media. I've written a little bit in Town Hall about this. There's been an unfolding of a tale at Harvard University that I think is pretty disappointing. And I know in my own public commentary, I haven't been too high on university level education for a little while, especially since my colleague Dennis Prager kind of opened my eyes to just how many wrongs were being done long before Doge came along or Trump or anything else. But now under Trump, he's actually using the bully pulpit of the White House to say, we're not going to keep funding this nonsense by the taxpayers, which is what's been happening. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And especially for a place like Harvard, where, and I don't know where you went to school, if you went to school, doesn't bother me one way or the other. But I know that for the whole time I was growing up, if you had a child that you could get into Harvard and your parents, they would do anything they had to. They would work 5 jobs. They would, do whatever was necessary. It was the pinnacle of American education. And it is now literally a clown school. I can't get over what kind of nonsense is going on there. You're a mom. You've got kids. They're going to be at that age, college age, soon enough. What's your take on this?
I think the first thing that you said that we should really explain to your viewers is that these American institutions like Harvard, founded in 1636, I believe, 1636, the oldest American institution of higher education, these were founded by white Christian males. And I think that that is actually what is at the root of all of this. These American institutions were founded on the Judeo-Christian values that have made America great. Actually, not at all on Islam and not at all on communism. They rejected both on its face. And what has happened now to American institutions of higher education, but also certainly K through 12, and you see this indoctrination beginning even in nursery schools, is this anti-Americanism. So people coming to this school from abroad, international students, as well as, quote, scholars, faculty and staff, are coming to a place that has already been captured. These schools are already captured by the left, and now they're coming and they are creating just a very hostile anti-American environment.
Well, and there's been a kind of a carving out of a space for them to come, and then the void was filled by people that took the opportunity to do it. And this is what and this kind of cross-pollinates a lot of topics that you and I have discussed in the past, because state capitals that are changing their flags to incorporate an Islamic star, schools that are teaching stuff, even private schools in New York, before it goes to the public school level, indoctrinating early on, trying to convince and brainwash children that, what has been taught here for 200 years is wrong. There is certainly a move afoot that seems well positioned to, every time we say we're going to give up sovereignty in this area, that someone moves in and takes over. It seems like Trump is kind of up against it in kind of a backwards fashion. Like, this was delivered on, this is what he came into office being handed, and now he's trying to put incentives and carve out ways to put the pressure on. But when I hear the words Harvard University suing the United States of America, there's a part of me in my 50 or 55-year-old bones that I cannot get past how that kind of pinnacle of education has turned into this toilet of values that we don't recognize.
It's profound. It has been infiltrated by Islamists and Marxists. It's tragic what Harvard has done, because, again, it is an American institution. It's an iconic institution. It is built on these fabulous principles, which it is now just completely throwing to the wind, not to mention all these people who have graduated from these Tony institutions with their diplomas, which are now rendered almost useless. I mean, they're a joke. There are ways to stop this. I think what Trump is doing is actually quite brilliant because he has put the spotlight on Harvard, not at all on the Trump administration. Look, Harvard can get that grant money. It can get all the money it wants. All it has to do is two things: stop it with the DEI and stop being anti-Semitic. Harvard doesn't want to. We must therefore conclude Harvard wants to lose the money, lose the research, and then stop being racist and anti-Semitic.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. Kevin McCullough, hoping your weekend is off and running on a great start. And we just want you to have a great time. That's why we try to mix the fun and the entertainment and other things with this particular show. Because look, the week's been hard. You've been plowing through a ton of news. Some of it not very good. Some of it seeming to just go in cycles over and over again. And so, yeah, we do address serious issues, but we do try to have a little giggle and a little song in your heart all before we're done every weekend. One other thing that I've asked you to do over the years, and that is to help us free and liberate human beings who are actually enslaved and have been for about 15 years. A lot of people don't know this. I just looked this up. Listen to this. 50 million people are still trapped in slavery, modern slavery worldwide. 50 million. Did you know that? Do you know how many millions of people were trapped in slavery at the height of Europe and America's slave habits? It wasn't 50 million. So we have more people enslaved right now on planet Earth than ever before. And the people that we're liberating, the women in northern Sudan who were taken captive by Arab Islamists who do not think of them as people. They think of them as property. They mistreat them. I could go into at length to tell you that the abuse that these women have taken over the last 15, 20 years is just, it's obscene. It's inhumane to our fellow human beings. But what I like about what you and I do together each year is that we kind of just set all of the issues aside, and we don't see race, and we don't see color, and we don't see anything except a heart that is not free, a person that is not liberated. And then we go and liberate them. And you and I together over the last more than 10 years, I want to say at least a dozen years, we have now come very close to crossing our 5,000th slave liberated. And when you think about that, friends, over that length of time, that's 5,000 human lives that have received their freedom, their liberation, their ability to pick and choose what they want their life to be, not what somebody says it has to be. Not a slave master who beats them if they speak back to him, not a slave master's son who sneaks in and rapes them in the middle of the night, and they're not allowed to protest. It's not somebody who takes a baby away from them after they've been impregnated by one of these slave masters, and they want to raise the child, but the slave master says it's his. These are all the kinds of abuses that they've experienced in their time in captivity. And you and I and our very important partners at Christian Solidarity International, which we wouldn't be able to do any of this without them, they were the ones that basically brought the world together to end the Sudan Civil War. But when the world leaders left and the two nations were created and there was a peace, they didn't liberate the slaves, and there were about 185,000 at their peak. Now, CSI, over the last number of years, our efforts with them and with other people, the total work has been able to liberate about 150,000, but that leaves somewhere in the 35 to 40,000 range left when you consider children. And in the last 2 years, we've been able, for the first time, to help slaves bring their children with them in liberation. What do they get? They get a bag of hope. They get a bag of what they need, a year's worth of food. It's more than a bag. Year's worth of food, year's worth of grain to plant a following year's worth of food. They get all the utensils they need to cook, clean, fish, and sometimes even hunt with. They have things to protect them from the elements, tarps and blankets and things that will keep them warm in the cold. And then they have things like water filters and different feminine hygiene products that they may need, etc. This is all included in what's called the bag of hope. And when you give, you help make that happen. Take a listen to this story. It's about a woman named Ahok and what truly happened to her.
I was a child when I was abducted by the Arabs. My parents used to own livestock, and my mother would do all the cooking for us. I don't remember the year that I was captured. There had never been any problems in our village. Then one day, all of a sudden, we heard that there were Arabs attacking Dinka villages throughout the south. We were so worried we could not even sleep at night. It was a big concern to my mother and my father. We were told that these Arabs were heavily armed and would kill all the animals and people when they would attack. We were very scared. Then one morning, they attacked our village. We scattered in different directions and I ran, but I was captured. My entire village was burned down, and I've never seen a member of my family since. Then I was taken north, into slavery. My eyes saw horrific things on that trip to the north. Women were raped right in front of us. Men were beaten, and 4 men were killed because they tried to fight back. They were shot dead before our eyes. Once at the slave master's house, I was pretty much starved and worked brutal hours every single day doing difficult and very, very hard work. There was no relief. And then they raped me. My slave master did not think of me as a human. He would not even let me go to the hospital when I fell sick. And one day I heard that there was a slave retriever from CSI close by. How I wanted to be free. That retriever secured my freedom. And thank God I was able to return to South Sudan. Thank you to each of you who helped the slaves be free. But please don't stop until we get them all.
It's a reasonable request. The phone number is 888-342-1010, 888-342-1010. And your gift right now of only $250 will liberate another girl like Ahok, the one you just heard the story from. The names may sound different to our Western ears, but their hearts, their desires, their lives are no different than your own daughters. Friends, if you believe that slavery is evil, and if you believe that we should be here to make a difference, then please do. Pick up the phone, 888-342-1010, 888-342-1010. You can also give online by just going to bringherhome.org. That's bringherhome.org or 888-342-1010. That's 888-342-1010.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.